Amy Jacobson, welcome to the podcast. I'm very
Hello, how
good.
you
I'm
going?
all the better for submitting my book to the same publisher as you yesterday morning.
It's exciting times, right? It's like
It,
birthing a new
it is, it
baby.
is. And actually, I submitted it yesterday and got an email from my editor last night. And then it just kind of hit me. I was at the airport, I'd done an all day workshop, and I was just like,
Do you know what though? When I submitted my second book, I think I'd put all of this pressure on that submission date, and once I did it, it was that absolute relief. But then you go into the editing process and you forget just how intense that is as well. It's fun. It's absolutely fun, but oh gosh, it's
yeah,
intense as
look,
well.
I'm fine with that. It was the deadline, and mine was tight because I'd also submitted my PhD about a month ago, so I was
Ooh.
juggling two frigging things at the same time. So I don't know whether I'm Arthur or Martha at the minute. So if I go wibble in the middle of this podcast, you know why. Now, we're not here to talk
It's
about
all
me.
good.
That is a poor example of emotional intelligence there for me right now. Starting a podcast with someone on emotional intelligence and talking about myself. So you are an expert on emotional intelligence. You've written two books now on emotional intelligence. Your second one is going to be out very, very soon. So tell our listeners, look, firstly, what inspired you to get into this area and to write not one but two books on emotional intelligence?
The mind, like people's minds have always fascinated me. And I think, for as far as I can go back, I was more fascinated to begin with I guess the bad side in the mind. I was really into criminology,
Wow.
forensics, to think how can some people's minds be so messed up. And look, the more I played in that area, I realized I just can't switch off. I will not be able to switch off and sleep at night diving deep into these areas. So I kind of parked it for a while, but always had that fascination. And eventually it came back through, from my career in the corporate world to seeing how much of an impact different people had on situations and how people responded, and the impact that they had on performance, the impact they had on relationships, on success. So I started to dive deeper into, okay, well, how do we leverage the mind in a good way, in a really great way, to be able to improve situations? So I started to do all of my studies in that side, and what led me to take it further and to write the books was the absolute lack of understanding that was out there. And it's because a lot of the data that's out there, it's very
Mm.
sciencey, which is fantastic, right? It's so intriguing, but it's also quite hard to take the scientific work and simplify it or actually apply it to your day to day to say, okay, that's great, but how do I actually grow this? How do I improve? I know what's causing it, but how do I take control of it? So that's where it all kind of started, and absolutely love it. I get to meet the most incredible people on my paths, and it still astounds me that everybody's mind just works so differently, and the impact that you can have on the outcomes simply by the way that your mind is
Now that
wired.
leads into the next question. So, is the old question: are leaders born or made? Is emotional intelligence genetic or learned? Or I am guessing it's a bit of a mix. But what's the right answer?
It absolutely is. Yeah, it is a mixture. The way that I look at emotional intelligence is I think that the first mistake we make is we think that people are either emotionally intelligent or they're not. And I don't agree with that. I think that emotional intelligence is a skill, the same as all the other skills that we learn in life. And some of us are born naturally with more skill in that area. But can we develop it? Absolutely, we can. But I think at never at any point in time would I call somebody emotionally intelligent, because I think, every situation happens and we've got a choice to make. We can either choose to respond in an emotionally intelligent way or choose not to. So while some people have that natural skill come to them, and a lot of people don't actually know what it is, and they kind of search to find out why they've got it and why other people don't, it's a skill, so it can be taught. Is it easy? No. But can you build your emotional intelligence over time by building the skill and applying it and continuing to apply it and building those neural pathways in your mind, yes, you
So,
absolutely can.
look, I've just realised we haven't actually properly defined it. Let's, and I think most people kind of get it, right? But what is
Yeah.
the kind of gold standard definition, or just your definition? I mean, is there a widely accepted definition that's out there, or is it?
Yeah, they tend to differ a bit. I guess the most accepted one out there is about emotional intelligence is the ability to manage your own emotions and to manage the impact you have on the people around you. I dive a little bit deeper into that, and I think that emotional intelligence is the how and why what we do. So what you can do, and and what you know and what you can do, that's your IQ. But the how and why you actually do it, that's your EQ or your emotional intelligence. And it's really it's understanding the way that your mind is ticked and that your mind ticks, and it's working with it rather than against it. So knowing, okay, this is my natural wiring. This is how it works for me. So how do I be a better person, or how do I be the best person I can possibly be based on how my mind is wired, what those neural pathways
That
actually look
that
like?
springs up a couple of questions for me, and you may or may not know the answer to this. So in terms of, let's take neurodivergent people, and particularly who
Yeah.
are on the autism spectrum, who often have difficulty with emotions, difficulty recognizing emotions. Any research around that,
Yeah.
and the impact on their emotional intelligence, and then if they can use strategies to learn emotional intelligence, that I'll give you that first one, and then I'll ask the second one.
Yeah, beautiful. So there's two different things in play here. I think that when I speak emotional intelligence, I think we have to um, separate that from neurodiversity as well, because I think that's in a slightly different area. That really does come down to, a lot of areas around your genetics and the way that you are actually wired. Um, does it impact it? Yes, absolutely. So if you have somebody, like you said, that is on the autism spectrum, they are going to struggle more with emotional intelligence, and their levels are going to be different. And I think that to approach it in the same way that you would approach somebody else and expect them to be able to learn and build their
Yeah.
skills, I think is unrealistic. I think that it needs to be a slightly different approach there. So when I'm speaking about emotional intelligence, I'm more talking about, if you go with that 80/20 rule, I'm more going with those people that don't have those neurodiverse challenges, or that side. Totally leave it to the
Yeah. Okay.
medicals.
And then, so people who have had adverse childhood experiences that then
Yep.
significantly shape their brain and how they process
Hmm.
emotions, and presumably that can
Yep.
have an impact on their emotional intelligence, because their brains then become shaped around maybe one or two particular emotions. Anything that you've
Yep.
seen on that, and whether that is an inhibitor of them optimizing their emotional intelligence, or can they navigate around it if they're aware of it?
Look, it is a big blocker or limitation, because when you think about emotional intelligence, it stems from those neural pathways, and those neural pathways are defined by our values, our beliefs, our experiences, our habits. So if you have somebody who has had quite a traumatic experience, or has had quite a pivotal moment in their life that has created a neural pathway that is so deeply embedded, it absolutely is going to impact the mind is going to naturally default to those areas. Is it something that they can work with? Yes, I do believe that it is. Again, is it easy? No. I mean, you've got to have that first step of awareness, right? And you've got to be able to dig in deep to understand the neural pathway that exists, the triggers that are actually attached to the beginning of that neural pathway, and also the emotions that are attached to the trigger and the neural pathway. Once you start to understand that, then you can dive deeper into being able to, I guess, rewire that neural pathway. And we
Yeah.
know that that is possible to rewire neural pathways. But as I said, it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of work to be able to process it and go through it. So yeah,
Yeah,
it
like
definitely
the
is
reason
possible.
that I asked that question, I was running a workshop yesterday, an all-day workshop, and was talking about those early life experiences and how they shape our brain, but then also talked about
Hmm.
neuroplasticity and with self-awareness and self-regulation, how you can then change the wiring
Yeah,
back of your amygdala, right? Because we do have that enormous
yeah,
neuroplasticity, but as you say, it's about doing the work, right? There's no emotional intelligence fairy
so
that you can
easily.
just or a program you can download from the
No.
internet just yet.
Oh no, look, that's my disclaimer every time I run a program is you will not leave this room emotionally intelligent. I wish that's how it worked, but yeah, unfortunately it doesn't. The same as reading a book, right? Reading my book, as great as it is not going to make you emotionally intelligent. It's the work that you do
Yeah,
afterwards with the information that you
absolutely.
get.
So, given that you've written a book on AI and leadership and one on personal, give us the impact that emotional intelligence has, one, in the workplace and from a leadership perspective, and then just two, from an everyday individual going about my general life perspective.
Yeah. So if I start with the personal side, we know that your emotional intelligence is it's how you act, it's how you impact the people around you. Now, it is usually from a personal point of view a little bit more intense, given that when we're around people where we feel safe and where we feel trusted, we tend to uh, we tend to bring out the worst in us
Mm,
because we feel safe. So our emotional intelligence usually isn't as strong around those people that we feel safe in around because we kind of let down our guard. And it's that whole thing in the mind where the mind makes choices based on the potential consequences, right? So what do I stand to gain versus what do I stand to lose in this situation? The emotional intelligence, when we look in those personal relationships and conversations, especially with the people that we live with, we find that that emotional brain drives a lot more often than our logical brain does. So it is in play, our subconscious mind's in play, our ego's in play, which drives our opinions, which then shows those differences in there. So to manage your emotional intelligence and develop your emotional intelligence for your personal side is going to directly impact your relationships with the people that you live with your family, with your friends, the people you surround yourself with, because it's going to change communication and it helps us to get out of our own head and actually realize it's not
mm,
always about us. So from a personal side, so some of the impacts that I've heard, I've run programs within organizations where we've gone in to actually help the organization, but had people contact me later to say, this has actually totally
mm.
saved my marriage. Like this has made me realize that, that I'm not being emotionally intelligent when I'm listening to my partner, that I am making it about me, that, maybe they are right when they say I don't listen. So the impact can have a huge change to your lifestyle and your relationships from the personal side. If we look at the
Actually, just
workplace,
before we
the
jump into, because
workplace,
I
oh, yep,
actually want to dive into that because it's interesting what you say that with those people, particularly with the ones that we live with, we kind of let our guard down a little bit, and I think everybody relates to that, right? They talk differently to the people at home
yeah.
than they do to people at work. So does that suggest then that emotional intelligence is really not that innate? And that it's something that we need to really be conscious around if our natural bent is
Yes.
to just not be that emotionally intelligent. Where it's that animal instinct in
Yeah.
us that's a more about fucking me, and what are you doing to me?
Exactly. If you think about it, right? If you think about it, our mind does what it does. Like it makes its choices, it says what it is, it does the things we do because it believes that it's the right way to do it. So we do the things that we do when we're stuck in our own mind and we say, what's in this for me? How will I benefit from this? And that's what you're kind of looking at. How will
Mm,
this make me feel? So when you're around other people that you feel safe around and they do something different, or they have a different opinion, or they're coming from a different angle, the mind kind of gets disrupted and thinks, well, hang on a second. If they're doing it different than me, or if they've got a different opinion to me, what is that trying to tell me about my way of doing it and my opinion? Because, like, clearly I'm right. Like, I do it this way because it's the right way. It's not rocket science, just do it my way. So when we're fronted with people that don't do it the same way, that aren't thinking about how we're feeling constantly, it is kind of that disruptor. And because we feel so safe in that environment, we have that emotional hijack, or that amygdala hijack, right? Where we just think, oh, we haven't got much to lose here. They love us. It's not like we're going to lose our whole relationship or anything just over me saying one thing. So we just snap, and we come straight up from our emotional mind. And it's that need to be right, and we've wired that into ourselves. This whole world is based on being right, doing the right thing, being right, getting ahead because you've got enough ticks, or you've got the right answers. So it's natural that when we do feel safe in front of people, we will lower our guard. We will be more selfish. We will think about it more from our point of view. We will stay more stuck in our head and be thinking about our feelings and what's in this for us.
Yeah, it is kind of how the human brain works, right? Is that we perceive reality,
Absolutely.
perceive reality through our personal lens, and really deep down in your brain, in the chimp brain, the emotional brain, it's just me, and we need to learn strategies. And I think, as you rightly say, when you're around people that you feel safe and secure with, you're more likely to be that natural dickhead part, right?
That's right. It just comes straight out because it's kind of, I guess it's that old, challenge or question that says, when we do things for charity, do we actually do them for the people that
For,
benefit, or do we do them
yeah,
because it makes us feel
that's
like a
right.
good person? Do we do things for our kids because they benefit from it, or do we do it because it makes us feel like a good parent? We are constantly striving, naturally defaulting to be the best person we can be, but it's from an
Yeah, yeah.
egotistical reflection, right? It's yeah. So the more comfortable we are, we're going to let that happen. Where you put us into an environment where we're not as safe, not as comfortable, then we are a little bit more aware of it, because the consequence can be
Yeah,
so much
and
higher.
yeah, and judgment of others that we don't know, right? That we don't have credits with,
That's
and
right.
so we're on our best behavior.
Yeah.
So let's now skip to the workplace, and just individual to individual within the workplace, the impact of emotional intelligence, and then from a leadership perspective, because I think probably lots of people who are listening to
Yeah.
this will have had leaders or no co-workers who are not that sharp in this area, and other ones who have had co-workers and leaders who are cracking in this area.
Yeah. I'd even add a third angle to it too, Paul, is that what I notice most of all is when I go into organizations, you've got the levels of emotional intelligence between individuals, as you said, and their interactions, and then between the leaders. But then you've also got the external emotional intelligence, because a lot of the time when we're looking externally to our customers, to our clients, to our community, to whoever we're kind of serving through that organization, we tend to do emotional intelligence well then. But when we look internally, we're really not great at
It's
it.
the same
And
analogy
if
with
we
the
look at that,
personal stuff, right?
right,
Yeah,
because you feel safer, because when you're speaking with customers direct, you've got more of a risk that A, they're a stranger, but B, they could make a complaint. It could impact your job, where you feel like you've got more fight in you or you're seen more on even path with those people internally. So you kind of drop that little bit. Now, those internal relationships are probably where we see some of the poorest emotional intelligence. And again, that is because the longer you've been there, and if you kind of picture somebody that goes into an organization, into a new workplace, those first couple of months, you're kind of
yes,
like on your
yes.
best behavior, right? And then the more comfortable you get, the more you get to know people, the more opinions you make on the people around you, as well as when you start to bring that emotional mind into play and you start to drop that logical brain and you start to drop your emotional intelligence in situations. So that self-sided side of our mind starts to drive a little bit more. So your emotional intelligence, it 100%, it influences and it impacts your culture. So any workplace that you're going to walk into, if it has a great culture, it is because the emotional intelligence is high, or the emotional intelligence is very well managed and noticed. Where you walk into a toxic workplace, you walk into places where you've got people in conflict, or underperformance, or people in wrong jobs, then that's when we know that the emotional intelligence is lacking, and it's just not there, because the right conversations, the tough conversations, are not being had. The honesty is not happening. The decency to be able to get out of your own head and understand what other people are going through and what they're being impacted and how you're impacting them. That's the impact of emotional
It's starting
intelligence.
to seem to me that safety and security is the saboteur of emotional intelligence.
Well, that's what I say, right? Every single time you make a choice, your mind is going to weigh up and say, what do I stand to gain from this? What do I stand to lose from
That
this? And
is completely
yes,
aligned to the integrate model of the way the brain works by the Brain Sciences Institute. And they say that the core twin motivations of everybody is to minimize danger or threat and maximize reward, right? And it's that constant evaluation that's
absolutely.
going on, right? Very interesting. Now, let's now talk about your framework, right? So you have a framework around emotional intelligence and 5 different things: own it, face it, feel it, ask it, drive it. So let's take each one of those in turn.
Yep.
So firstly, own it. What do you mean by own it when it comes to emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So, Paul, if I could sum up emotional intelligence in 2 words, it would be own it. Own it is about owning who you are. It's about owning the values and beliefs that you've made in your life that are driving those decisions to get you where you are. It's about owning how well you manage your own emotions, owning the impact you have on the people around you, owning reality, owning the fact that sometimes things will happen and you have no control over it. But you've got to own the reality in that this is happening, whether I like it or not. This is happening, and I can try to be in denial, but in order to move forward, I have to own the reality of the situation, and I have to own my own self-awareness and the role that I play in it. So that ownership is heavily around your self-awareness, but it's so much more than that. It's about really owning your own definition of success, owning your purpose, owning why you get out of bed every morning, owning what is driving you to kind of hit that happiness level, or what you truly believe is happiness. So you've got to start with own it. You have to understand how you are wired and what is driving you and what you're heading towards. Like what is that enoughness that you're looking for in your life?
It seems to me that that's quite aligned with Viktor Frankl and the last of human freedoms, right? Is that he said,
Yeah.
and that came out of
Yeah.
Auschwitz. For those who don't know it, Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist who was imprisoned in Auschwitz and a couple of other concentration camps. But realized through that process, he said, man can take from you everything, your dignity, your pride, your belongings, your loved ones, everything but one thing: your ability to choose how you react to your circumstances. And
That's right.
that seems to
Yeah.
play into this.
It does. It is around that choice, and I'm a big believer in, we are where we are in life based on those choices. And I think it's one of the to me, it's that real hit you light bulb moment when you're working on your emotional intelligence, because it's so easy for our mind to blame other people, to say, well, this is happening because they did this, or the world is like this, or this happened. But at the end of the day, you've got to own the fact that you've made choices throughout that period as well. And the choices that you've made have actually led to it. And you've got to own the role that you're playing in it, because you always have that choice. And without that level of awareness, without that ownership to say, okay, I'm going to take some of this blame on here because it is actually me. Like, maybe it's not everyone around me. Maybe I am the problem with myself. Maybe I am my own worst enemy. And also, as I said, it's not just that self area, it's that realization too that things are going to happen around you and you have no control over it. You cannot control any other person. You cannot control the situation. You can only control how you choose to respond. But you have to own the reality that once something has
Yeah,
happened,
that's right.
it's happened.
Yeah.
Like, move on.
Yeah, that
Move
brings us
on.
into the stoic zones of control, right? And focusing on that which you can control. And I think
Yeah,
Jocko Williams would love
exactly.
you. This whole idea of extreme ownership. So let's
Oh,
now talk to the second one. After own it is face it. So what do you mean by that?
yeah. So face it, we're still in our own head. So the own it is when we're in our own head. Face it, we're still in our own head. And this is when all of the emotions start to come into play, right? So when we've got to the point that we've owned the fact that, oh gosh, actually it is me, and I am having an impact on this, I am playing a role, or own the fact that this is happening around us. This face it is when all of these emotions start to come up, and they might be, it might be fear, it might be anger, it might be upset, it might be excitement, it might be love, it might be happiness, whatever it is. But at this point in time, the emotional brain is just going to send forth all of these emotions, and you might go through hundreds of emotions in relation to this. But the face it is about the fact that your emotions are actually, your emotions occur for a reason, and you have to face them. To not face your emotions, to kind of ignore them or to put a lid on them and push them down and just hope that they go away, is never going to help with those emotions, and it's never going to help with you moving forward. So in this face it zone, it is all about understanding how these emotions are coming into play, what is actually driving them, but how do I face them and process them and clear them and able to move on rather than them compounding and building up. Because if you have that compounding
It's going to be a
effect, it's like
volcano.
a
There's
pressure
going to be a
cooker. It is
volcano,
going to
right?
explode.
I,
Yeah, and usually at the
yeah.
worst possible
Or when you
time.
go home.
Exactly right. I always like to say, like, I don't know if you read it, Paul, but when I was younger, there's a book for young kids
No,
called Who
no, no.
Sank the Boat, and it's all of these animals. It's kind of like, you've got a wharf or a jetty and a little dinghy at the end, and they walk all the animals down, and they get in based on size, like your horse first, then your cow, then your sheep, and etc. And the boat is floating until the little
Right.
mass jumps on, and then the boat sinks. And it's like sometimes we're sitting in front of somebody and they're absolutely blowing up, like the pressure cooker has exploded, and we're thinking, how? Like,
Yeah.
this is not that big a deal, but we don't realize it was all those other animals compounding and compounding that just kind of created the boom or the eruption
So
at the end.
let's move on to the next one. So we talked about owning it, and we've talked about facing it. Now let's talk about feel it.
Okay, so feel it is when we get out of our own head. So the own it and face it, once you're through those two steps, you realize, okay, I'm okay with this. I've owned it. I've faced my emotions. Now you get out of your own head and you start to think, how are the people around me feeling? So this is
Right.
when your empathy kicks in. This is your ability to say, okay, it's no longer about me. I'm okay. How are they feeling? And this is when we start to understand and, know that other people are not failed versions of us, that other people, will be wired different. They'll have different responses. And this is not where judgment comes into play. This is looking to understand their wiring and, what they're bringing to the table and to help them get through it. It's about empowerment. And as I said, it's about empathy. It's about understanding their strengths, the roles that they play. And it's also understanding how you impact them as well. So, what does things look like from their point of view, from their side, from the way that
And
they are
and I think
feeling?
curiosity plays a huge role here, isn't it? And it's
Huge.
understanding that we will often just jump to judgment of others, but if we're to actually sit back and be curious and go, that's an interesting response. Where did that come from, right? Is that something in
Yeah.
that person, but is that something that I said or the way that I actually said it? And I guess this one it feels to me like is probably easier to practice and get better at quicker than the previous
Yes.
two, right?
Yeah, yeah. So face it is by far the toughest part of emotional intelligence. Like controlling your emotions is the toughest side because you're working against the science of the mind, right? And the
Yeah.
way which we're wired. But when you get to this point and feel it, there are small one percenters that you can put in place so quickly. But it's also being able to sit down and understand how other people are how other people approach things and that is it's easier because it's knowledge that you're taking on and learning from it, but you're not having to rewire anything within yourself. You're not
Yeah.
having to rechange habits or long-term embedments where this is okay, I get it now. And at this stage, I see some people literally like their faces just drop and go, oh, now I get it. Now I get it. That's why, when I'm going to this person and I'm giving a really short, sharp communication, they're coming back at me with questions and want to see details and statistics and research. That's why it's not because they're questioning my ability or my credibility or what I'm telling them. It's the fact that they learn through information. Their mind requires more data. It's more data driven, where mine is very big picture, high level,
And,
straight to
and,
the
and I
point.
think it's kind of helpful here, and it's going back to what you said about our kind of view of the world is shaped by our belief systems, our experiences, our emotions, and stuff like that. And I find it's really helpful for people to understand that your brain is a bonsai, right? And it's running a personalized hallucination of reality, right? And my brain's running a
That's right.
slightly different personalized hallucination of reality. Like anybody who thinks that their view of the world is real is completely demented, right? Because that brain is just
Exactly
a
right.
filter that becomes shaped by experience. And I think when you understand that, it kind of really helps this empathy bit, because, and you combine it with curiosity.
Yes.
It's like, okay, right. Maybe
Yeah.
I shouldn't expect everybody to react the way that I think they should react, right?
Exactly right. I love that bonsai example. It takes me back to Miyagi days, right? That you'll never have a bonsai that
Yeah.
is exactly the same. It's all going to look slightly different. And depending on the way that you trim it, the way that you craft it, it's going to look different again. And yeah, that is very
Yeah, and
much
even
how the
old
mind
bonsais
works.
can be reshaped, right?
Yes, that's
So
right.
let's
That's
now
right.
move on to ask it. So I take it that's about interaction,
Mhm.
is it?
Yeah, yeah. So ask it is about asking the right questions, but it's also more importantly about answering the questions that are being asked of you. So this is where your two-way communication comes in. It's where we start to understand that communication is actually not about us. It's 100% about the person receiving the message. And the whole definition around communication is to be able to get a message from one person through to another. So the EI side of this is when we start to tap in and realize that if we are communicating and the person who we are communicating with is not understanding the message, that's on us. Like we are not communicating in a way that works for that person, that they are understanding it. So we cannot just, give up and put up our hand and say, well, it's done clearly, they don't understand me. No, actually, you got to take responsibility in this. How are you actually communicating it? And it's we dive deeper into that communication because I think if you look at, like, if we go personal and work, right, if you look at any marriage or any relationship that's not working, usually the first thing that's called out, communication. If you're looking at one that works really well, first thing they call out, communication. You look at any culture in any environment, and if it's working really well, first thing they call out, communication. Bad, communication. It's it is how human beings interact. And when you have two or more human beings interacting, it is how that interaction happens, the questions that they ask, the listening that they're doing, the answers that they're providing, the back and forth, that is going to determine the outcome
Yeah,
every
yeah.
single
I
time.
remember going through military training, and they always said to us, "You can never over communicate clarity," and I think that's a big part of communication. It's not just um, delivering your communication and expecting that it's landed the way that you intended. I think that checking how it's actually landed and checking the understanding of it, right? And by the way, email is a
Yeah.
shithouse form of communication.
Oh, don't get me started on email. In my first book, there's a whole chapter on emotional intelligence in email. It absolutely kills me.
Is
And
that
I think,
just a short
this is the
chapter?
way we're
It does not
going.
exist.
I just think, do not do this. But I think, we've got to accept the fact that the way that the world is going and communication is going, verbal communication, unfortunately, is decreasing. And forms of electronic communication are increasing massively, and we've always known that tone and body language is more important than the words that we use. However, when we have electronic communication, we've got to start to be aware that tone and body
Missing. Yeah.
language
Yeah.
isn't naturally evident, but the mind still needs it. So the person receiving it will make it up,
Yes.
and they're going to make it up based on
Yes.
your relationship, the words you use. So it's you've got to. It's why it's probably even more important with electronic communication to get it right, to know the impacts of the words you're using, to know the impact of whether it's a two-line email or a
And that's the thing, like
two-page
often you're
email.
in a rush and you just fire off an email, right? And don't sit and take the time to read it and all of that. And that can just land
Yeah.
horribly.
Because you're in that conscious mind, and I do it myself, Paul. I'll sit down and smash out an email, and then before I send it, I'll read it, and I think, oh, Amy, you are completely in your own head right now. Like, this is all about you. How about you actually say hi, and how about you check in with this person? So it's just that it is that environment that we're in that is such a, I hate the word busy. It is that it's in that intense reaction. Everything has to be done now, and everything has to be done at a speed. And when that happens, it's our conscious mind driving it, and our subconscious mind just doesn't come into play very often. And that's where we lose. Like, our emotional intelligence is sitting in our subconscious mind. So if we're not engaging that subconscious mind, it's going to be very, yeah,
Yeah.
very
Okay.
black and white, very
So
cold at
last
times.
one is drive it. I presumably this is not
Yeah.
drive a stake through the heart of the person who's not understanding you. No.
No, definitely not. But this drive, this is where the rubber hits the road, right? So you've gone through, you've owned it, you've faced all your emotions, you've got out of your own head, you've understood how the people around you are feeling, you've engaged them in conversation, you've spoken about and answered the questions. And drive it is the doing part, it's the motivation. So how do you actually take it now? Because I think that there's one part, at times emotional intelligence can be seen as a soft thing, and drive it is the area that you've got to be decisive. And you know what? Not everyone's going to agree with you, but you have to be decisive and you have to drive it at some point in time. And when you do drive it, it's about making sure that you're working smart, not hard. So are you working with the way that the brain is wired, or are you working in a way that, there's no denying that you're working hard, but you're achieving nothing because you're just, tapping into so many things, and you're spending most of your day with your mind having to refocus, that you're actually never hitting that peak performance. So drive it is being able to take things and because unfortunately we're great at ideas but not always good at implementing them. So it's being able to take them the way the mind is wired in order to trigger those chemical reactions in our mind that actually give us the motivation and give us the drive to move forward and
Very
implement
cool. Now
something.
let's take all of that and throw it into a couple of scenarios, right? And I want to get the distilled version of you, because I think these scenarios, people could just go back and listen to what you said and worked it out. But if you kind of put it together, in terms of navigating difficult or challenging conversations or people, what's your kind of
Yeah.
strategy for people to use?
Yep. So if we look at that 5-step process when it comes to difficult conversations, then starting with the owner, you have got to own the fact that this conversation needs to happen. So many times we will
Yes.
avoid it at all costs. We'll sweep it under the carpet. We'll convince ourselves that, oh no, everything's okay now, or, it's okay. But you've got to own the fact that this conversation needs to happen and you have to do it. It's a must thing that you have to do. When we get into the face it is as soon as you accept the fact that, okay, this is happening and I'm going to have to do something about it. This is where the
Mm.
fear kicks in, right? Because as human beings, like fear of the unknown, fear of not knowing how this person's going to respond in this situation. Are they going to get angry? Are they going to get upset? How are they actually going to respond? It's the fear of judgment. Are they going to judge me in the way that I deliver it? It is the
I,
fear of
I, I was
confrontation.
going to
It's
say that,
so
and,
many
and, and there's
fears.
there's a lot of people who do not like confrontation, right? And this is a shitload worse for them.
Exactly right. And this is a mistake that we make, Paul, in this area is that when we don't face these emotions and process them, what we do is the amygdala gets triggered and we
Yeah.
go into fight mode, which means that because that fear is kind of connected in our head and we don't feel completely safe, we arm ourselves. And what I say
Mm.
is we over prepare. We arm ourselves with as much information as we possibly can. So we pull in every stat, every report, everything that this person said 5 years ago that I still haven't gotten over it. And it's kind of like by the time we go into this conversation, we have this huge backpack of ammunition on our back ready to go. And the minute we go into it, it triggers the amygdala in the other person
Mm.
and they come out fighting as well because they're fighting for their life. So these face it areas where you've got to face those emotions, you've got to process them, you've got to understand that this conversation is actually not about you. Like, I know you're scared and I know you don't like confrontation, but this conversation is not about you. And what are you looking to get out of this conversation? So, when we get through that face it and we start to go into feel it and we start to think, okay, how is this person feeling? Like, because a lot of the time, the reason why we're having the conversation is not the real reason why it's happening. So we might be having a conversation because somebody has done something poorly or said something poorly. But when you actually get out of your own head and you ask the right questions and you empathize and you listen to them, you hear that the problem is actually
Mm.
something way deeper than that. And if you just fix the situation, you're putting a band aid on it. You're absolutely just band aiding it. So, how do you then get to the point where this is where the open questions come in, right? Where your ask it kicks in and we ask open questions, and just even your standard question, like any difficult conversation should start
Mm.
with how are you, and a genuine how are you, because if you're going into a difficult conversation, you find out that that person has just had a morning where they've had to put their
Mm.
pet down.
Yeah.
Now is not the time to be
Reschedule.
having that
Reschedule.
conversation, right? Right. Because if you're pushing ahead, it shows that you're in your own head and you're doing this for your sake, not for their sake. You're not doing it for the right outcome. You're doing it to tick the box and say, I've done it. I've done what I needed to do. The rest is on them. So feel it and ask it is really about getting that empathy side, understanding it, but asking the really vital question of how do we fix this? And sometimes we've got to ask that question 4 or 5 times because their mind will naturally go back into that emotional hijack of, all of those emotions flowing out. We've got to pull them back in and say,
Mm.
but how do we fix this? How do we actually fix this? How do we move forward? And it's not until we can get them to kind of to draw that line in the sand and say, okay, let's go into the fix it mode now, that then we enter into the drive it, and that's where your actions happen. So we've got to go through the process of own it, face it, feel it, ask it, and drive it. But by the time we go into the conversation, we should be at feel it, but the other person will probably still be at own it. So we've got to help them to own it. We've got to help them to go through their emotions. We've got to listen to their emotions. We've got to empathize with their emotions. Then we've got to help them to get into feel it and know, okay, let's get out of
Mm.
your own head. How is this impacting everything else around you? Then you help them go into ask it, and then you help them go into drive it. So by the time you get to the end of the conversation, you're on the same page, you've got clear actions, you've got your support there that you're offering them as well to go through it, and you go through it together. And that's that we word, right? Like, how do we fix this? How do we do this together? Rather than being those two people that come into a conversation armed with
Bang
ammunition,
heads.
ready to fight against, Yeah, right. Between both amygdalas, like it's like an
Yes,
amygdala
indeed.
battle.
And that usually ends in
Yeah.
widespread mass destruction, right? Um,
Well, it's
yeah.
a battle of egos, right? It's like you are wrong, I am right.
So, Amy, just let our listeners know, when does the book come out? It's pretty damn soon, isn't it?
It is 25th of June is when it hits all bookstores worldwide. You can find it online. You can find it anywhere.
Pre-orders. I was
There are
about to ask
pre-orders
that if
open
it's
at the moment.
pre-orders. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So if you jump onto Amazon, Amazon has free orders at not free pre-orders pre-orders taking at the moment. So, but yeah, 25th of June is when it will hit all bookstores, airports, pretty
Cool.
much everywhere you'll
And
find
what
it.
was the name of your first book as well? Let's not forget about the first baby. Um,
Yeah, so the first book, here's
there you
something
go.
I prepared earlier. This is the first book. So this is Emotional Intelligence, a simple and actionable guide to increasing performance, engagement, and ownership. And as I said, that's your fundamental basics
Right.
of
And the
emotional
name of the second
intelligence.
book.
The name of the second book is The Emotional Intelligence Advantage, and it is mastering change and difficult conversations. So it's going to that
Excellent.
deeper
And then
level.
if people want, because you're a keynote speaker as well, so if people want to
I am,
book your
yes.
services, get you come in, teach their workplaces how to actually communicate and improve performance and everything along with it, how do they do that?
Yep. So just jump onto my website, which is amyjacobson.com.au, and you will find all the information there. You can find me on any social media
Awesome.
as well. And find my phone number. Pick up the phone and give me a call. I love a chat, as you can probably
There
tell.
we go. Excellent. Okay, Amy, thank you for enlightening us about emotional intelligence and the fact that we need to own it, face it, feel it, ask it, and drive it. And I would just encourage the listeners, drive yourself to Amazon or Booktopia or whatever it may be and get your order in.
Brilliant.